At an anti-BNP demonstration, the BNP attacked a group of young Asians, one of which was Qudus Ali, put him in hospital, police, and there was a vigil, and the police and the BAP attacked the vigil. It led to a mini riot. That was the basis of one of the early ADF songs, Tower Hamlets 9, because the Tower Hamlets 9 were 9 people that were arrested at this vigil, this demonstration, unfairly, of course.
Welcome to another episode of the NYUAD Arts Center podcast series. My name is Mikey Mhenna. With me, we have a special guest from the Asian Dub Foundation, Chandra Savale, who is a British musician. He joined the Asian Dub Foundation in 1994 and has been the band's longest-serving member. ADF is a British electronic music band that combines musical styles including jungle, rap, rock, dub, dancehall, raga, and South Asian music. Steve, welcome to the series.
Hi, how you doing, Mikey?
I'm doing really well. So I want to ask you a question. I heard online that Asian Dub Foundation started as a sort of like out of an educational project.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yes.
Walk me through that.
I'm sorry?
Walk me through that. Tell me a little bit. It's interesting to sort of see a musical project like this and a band that goes on tour.
Well, Oniwata Das and John Pandit, who was a youth worker at the time, Oniwata was teaching at a place called Community Music, which is very important in the history of Asian Dub Foundation. Set up a workshop for young Asians to get involved in music, and the first person that turned up was Master D, Dida Zaman, our original MC. And a few months later, I came down to join ADF, and I also became a music technology tutor. Right. And example, one of the vocalists who you'll see next week was in my class. So there's a very, very strong connection between an educational based philosophy and live performance. Right? Yeah. It's right at the heart of the group. And I still teach at the same place 30 years later. I teach a music history course.
Amazing.
So it's built into the group, and it's very unusual because most groups, bands or whatever, usually get together. They get together at school, or they meet on a scene and what have you. But we actually came together for educational purposes, and consequently, despite the name Asian Dub Foundation, within us we're a very diverse bunch. Always in terms of ages. Cultural background in terms of religion or origin, or and musical diversity as well. The oldest 3 members of Asian Dub Foundation at the beginning, myself included, we come out of the post-punk era and the acid house era in Britain. And consequently, we became the first group that I can think of that actually played live bass, live guitar, with jungle, which was an earlier form of drum and bass. Even disregarding the South Asian influences, we were doing something quite special, quite unusual. And that was partly because of the divergence in age range that we had that sound, because Dida was 15 when he joined, and, the oldest member of us was already 30. So we had a kind of interesting range of musical input already because of the educational input. And very much our philosophy of the time, and was really worked in practice, was we believed that if you gave people who were usually voiceless, especially young inner city South Asians or other minority groups, if you actually gave them the tools to make music, you would actually come out with a very new sound, and it would actually make innovative music. So not only did we believe in this aspect of it kind of like philosophically, we actually believed in it artistically too.
Yeah. Can you define some of these terms as best you can for those listeners and viewers who don't know, who are not familiar with words like dub and jungle?
Right, sure. Well, dub-reggae music was a spin-off of, was a development and a kind of studio development of reggae in the late 60s. And it consisted of taking a reggae song and basically reshaping it in the studio, where the producer is the central artistic leader, right? Where the mixing desk becomes an instrument. Right? So it's the reshaping of the sound. Not necessarily live. Well, not live, actually. It would actually probably would be done live and very spontaneous in the studio, but it would actually, the main output for it would be the record, the vinyl, you know?
Okay.
And usually if you listen to it, it's about sort of making space in a mix, like removing certain instruments and then adding echo and reverb. It's basically the origin of the remix, you know, which is pretty standard, has been very standard in music for over 40 years now. But the origin of it is in the late 60s in Jamaica.
And it comes from, so the term dub comes from the idea of overdubbing something. Yeah.
It's just a different dub. Sound dubbing is a term that comes from film, you know, to dub the sound onto a film. But the meaning was mutated to mean a reshaping of an existing sound mix in music.
So how does that relate to jungle? Let's talk about what is jungle.
Well, jungle is, how do you say this? Yeah, well, jungle is a very form of what we called hardcore techno originally, which is based around the breakbeat, which is the sample, a classic sample of that you used in hip hop, right?
Yeah.
The sample of a drum beat, like from a James Brown track, or a very famous one called the Amen Break, which was from a group called the Winstons in 1969. And basically that breakbeat was sped up to double the speed of a reggae track, basically. And the bass line was a very heavy electronic sound that kind of came from techno. But the difference between what jungle did with regard to what was called hardcore breakbeat techno was reintroduced reggae and dancehall elements into it. And so the breakbeat was foremost, and it's about a wildly changing breakbeat, but with a reggae bass line and often reggae inflected vocals, right?
Okay,
so that became,
So just in sort of like elementary terms, the drums are double speed, and the bass is kind of this laid back, off kilter.
It's not laid back.
Reggae.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so
it sound. Well, we don't never believe that reggae is a laid back music. Actually, it may be a certain tempo. Reggae can be really one of the most militant sounding music.
Okay, so let me rephrase that. I love this. I want to go down this thing.
Reggae can be many things. It can be laid back. It can be militant and confrontational. You know, so the bass line in jungle is not a laid back music. You know?
I guess I meant laid back tempo wise.
I'm sorry?
I guess I meant laid back tempo wise, but it's a really good point, right?
No, jungle is appears to the listener to be very fast, and it is. It's really one of the. It's as fast as punk speed. You know, it's a very fast music, and there's not many massively popular musics that have actually been high tempo. From punk and free jazz was the other one.
Yeah,
I think it actually goes back to jazz. Actually, a lot of the inflections in the way jungle producers programmed, but the bass line is kind of at the reggae tempo, right? At the half speed, right?
Yeah.
But it's reggae. It's a reggae style bass line, but usually done with a very distorted electronic bass sound. Right? And what we did was we incorporated it in a yet another kind of sidestep, I suppose, which is like we played the bass on a live bass and added guitar alongside the double speed breakbeat.
So let's talk about the agenda. Let's talk about the social agenda. So walk me through in the early 90s what East London was like politically and what agenda your music was reacting to.
Well, I mean, Asian Dub Foundation, the band, was actually formed to play a benefit for Youth Connection which was an anti-racist organisation. And you see, the British National Party were very strong in East London. They even succeeded in getting a councillor re-elected. Now, one of the early Asian Dub Foundation songs called Tower Hamlets 9, which is when at an anti-BNP demonstration, the BNP attacked a group of young Asians, one of which was Qudus Ali, put him in hospital, police, and there was a vigil, and the police and the BAP attacked the vigil. Led to a mini riot, and that was the basis of one of the early ADF songs, Tower Hamlets 9, because the Tower Hamlets 9 were 9 people that were arrested at this vigil, this demonstration, unfairly, of course.
Yeah.
So what you've got, he's got a direct anti-racist action that was going on with the early Asian Dub Foundation. But in terms of larger structural terms, we're talking about a new generation of people who'd grown up in the 70s and 80s in Britain in conditions of, at best, violent racial attacks. No, sorry, at worst, violent racial attacks, and at best, horrific cultural stereotypes, embarrassing and prejudices at every level of society, certainly in mass media, mass culture, and then more direct. The far right and the right wing of the Conservative Party also fingering South Asian people as the cause of economic problems, etc., etc.
In '94, when you start playing, what ears is your music falling on?
Well, originally a lot of benefit concerts, right? But then we were signed by Nation Records. So we were playing with groups like, you see, what there was a kind of, in the early 90s, there was a certain musical sort of, musical developments. Like at the same time, there was a lot of sort of like DJs and mixers and bands getting together that were actually incorporating so-called world music elements, a horrible term, into their music.
Yeah.
And kind of dressing up like it in this sort of exotic kind of costume thing. And then there was also, in parallel to that, a new generation of young Asians making a lot of music, with hip hop based. I mean, Fundamental, one of the first. And there was kind of like a South Asian version of Public Enemy, based on that kind of militant rap coming from America. But then you have groups like Trans Global Underground, which are more kind of party fun, sort of dress up group, dressing up as sort of in ethnic costume and what have you, and incorporating sort of elements into their music. So those were the musical developments. And there was a larger structural thing of, like people like our parents who came to Britain in the 50s and 60s, and then the next generation of young Asians having grown up in Britain, starting to make their mark culturally, which hadn't really happened before, except maybe with the Bhangra scene in the 80s. That was the first time that people started talking about an indigenous South Asian music. Yeah. In the early 90s, there was more developments of which we were one, which were more distinct, and more kind of diverse. People like Talvin Singh, who were very much, very much about the virtuoso-ness, but mixing it, Indian classical virtuosity with drum and bass and jungle, very much so. And us, which is more like out of a more, I suppose you'd be honest and say a left wing, quite radical perspective, and making music that reflected that.
When you guys started making this music, so you prepared yourself for the first show, were you thinking, okay, we are playing and talking to our friends, our community, or this is an opportunity to reach people who have not really thought about this community's, the discrimination against this community?
Definitely, right. We're playing anti-racist music with an anti-racist agenda. But you see, the thing is, I think that one thing that I think a lot of non-musicians don't understand, or people who are gigging, is you don't choose your audience, whether you like it or not. So basically you start doing gigs where you can get gigs. Originally it was a lot of benefits, but we found that quite soon that benefits aren't necessarily the best way of getting your ideas across, because they're usually very disorganized and they tend to lose money, you know what I mean? So it's like they're not necessarily the best vehicles. So the best vehicle is like, you have a record label, you get an agent, and you start playing gigs wherever you can. Because, my thing definitely was this music needs to be heard.
So, in a sense,
we're like segregated audiences.
Yeah.
We like it when lots of South Asian people turn up to gigs, as did happen in some cases. In some cases, it didn't. But the thing is, you have to play where you can play, but you mustn't compromise what you're doing. You can actually rejig your setup to make it more communicable, right? But you don't compromise what you're saying. Our message was, transferable to many different communities. And also, I think it was very important for white people to see what we were doing, very early, I'll tell you the sort of things. People would either think we're a great band, or they would think, but where are your costumes? Where's the dancing?
Where's the Asian
Where's
part?
my holiday in Goa? I came to see what I saw in Goa, So, it was a real struggle. I'll give you a great example that I'm going to feature in my talk next week is, we played with a group who are actually quite a good group, actually. I'm not going to name them, but we played, and basically they were kind of white guys in their 30s, sitting cross-legged with a sitar, right? Like this. And they were so embarrassed that we were going to follow them. They had to apologize. They said, look, I'm sorry, we're not the Asian Dub Foundation. But we really want to get over the meditative qualities of this music, right? And so they're like a bunch of 30-year-old white guys sitting cross-legged on the floor with joss sticks and hippie rubbish everywhere. And then we come on and basically blow the place apart with highly intense and exciting and militant music. And you could see, right, in a way that illustrates what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
More than any stuff I could say, that if you saw that, you'd see what was happening,
Yeah.
Why Asian Dub Foundation existed, why we were so bloody angry, to be honest.
Yeah. It's interesting because the way you answered the question at first was, anyone who's is a working musician knows you can't choose your audience, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But in the beginning, you were trying to choose your audience, right? And then you realize, oh, this is not going to work. We got to speak to anyone.
So, but it's not like we didn't want to play to certain audiences. You know what I mean? It wasn't that. We would play where we could play. It's also good to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We like playing, and you get better the more you play. And really, the more diverse the circumstances you play in, if you can get through them, the better you get.
So let me just ask a really basic question. Somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, cool, I'm going to be in Abu Dhabi when you guys are performing. And as far as I can tell, you won't be sitting cross-legged with a sitar, but what will you be playing? Who's on stage? What instruments are being played? Help walk me through the instrumentation.
Okay, yeah. So we're a hybrid band of electronics and very, very strong live elements. So it's live bass, a drum kit, guitar, that's me. We also have the best flute player that ever walked the earth, okay? Guy called Nathan Flutebox Lee, who single-handedly invented beatbox flute. So,
which is very popular on YouTube and TikTok now.
Yes, well, he's very popular, yeah. He's the inventor, original and best. Plus we have, we have MC Activator, who's very much a jungleistic type reggae style MC. And we also have a very good reggae singer called Squidly, Ghetto Priest. And we're also doing a bit of new, more electronic based stuff with a rapper called Black Chronicle. So it's going to be quite a diverse set, but it will be energetic. It will be very lively, and we hope it's exciting music,
I want to ask you about a word. Why foundation? Why is it called the Asian Dub Foundation?
Well, it describes what it is. You know, we're from an Asian background, and dub music is the foundation of what we do.
Mm.
But the cool thing about the foundation, you use the word foundation, is it does sort of imply a larger organization, which we have. You know, we had our own education organization for a few years called ADFED, ADF Education. So there is that element to the word foundation.
Yeah. How has the political message, the nature of anti-racist music changed in those 30 years though?
In terms of the whole debates about immigration and refugees, we've been saying the same thing. We wrote a song 2002 called Fortress Europe. And it was a science fiction kind of song set in 2022, right? And the opening lines are 2022, a new European order, robot guards patrolling the border. And guess what? In 2022, there were robot guards patrolling borders in America, right? Which really freaked me out because I wrote that line, right? And if you go on YouTube and you see the reactions to that song in 2022, you'll see a lot of people saying, oh, these guys predicted the future, blah, blah, these guys, this is what it's like, you know, basically the closing of borders and the more extreme elements, anti-immigrant rhetoric and whatever coming to bear to the point when we're talking about shooting immigrants at the border and using robot dogs to patrol them, right? So unfortunately, no, on that issue, we're singing about exactly the same thing we sung about on our album in 2003. In fact, most of the last album, Not by Design, is about that issue. Right? On the last album, we did a song which actually did very well, was number one in a few charts. We put a comedian's sketch to music, which is ridiculing the right wing's anti-immigrant rhetoric. And we put that to music.
Yeah.
And it was number one in quite a few charts, you know, and even though it got no airplay at all, but basically it was a kickback against the virulent anti-immigrant, xenophobic, hyper-nationalist rhetoric, which is dominating the British political scene. So, you know what? The answer is to a question, I can say a quite emphatic no. It's the same. At least since 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to talk about the shows in Abu Dhabi. Have you been to the region? Have you been to the Arab world before?
I mean, we played in Morocco. That's about it, you know? Me personally, I've been to Egypt. I've been to where you are a couple of times. Cairo. That's it, actually. Yeah.
So I'm curious what you expect, any expectations.
Twice. That's the nearest we've got, you know. Mm.
So it's going to be a new context for you. I'm curious what you expect about.
Yes, it is. It is a new context. Show. Well, my son is in a band actually, and he's played in Abu Dhabi a couple of times, but it's a very different kind of thing that he does. But you see, the thing is, I'm trying not to think. I haven't really had a chance with this project to get a set of expectations because I've been preparing for my talk and rehearsing for the live soundtrack element of it, which is we're doing something we haven't done for a couple of years in Abu Dhabi, which is the rescore to the film La Haine. So I haven't really had a chance to like sit down and go, what do I expect? You know?
Yeah.
My focus with this has been on getting everything right. So
I want to talk a little bit about what people can expect, at least. Let's talk about that because you're doing 2 engagements in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
In collaboration with the Arts Center. So Thursday, September 21st, at the Red Theater. Walk me through what people can expect for this show, which is highly innovative. Walk me through the show.
Describe, because everyone doesn't quite know what they're going to get with these live soundtrack things. What it is really, you're seeing us reinterpret the film through our music, but you can also still watch the film as a film.
Amazing.
We're kind of reinterpreting the soundtrack. In fact, we're giving the film a soundtrack that it didn't have, actually. except for a few musical moments, you know. So you'll see that live, but the visual focus will be the film itself.
Yeah.
And then you'll hear our live interpretation of it.
So for people who don't know what this film is, can you give a little background about La Haine?
Well, La Haine is a film really about life in what's called Le Bon Louis, which is like the poorer areas of the outskirts of Paris. And it's about police brutality and the antagonistic relationship between the youth there, particularly, and the police. And it's about three friends who live in a very antagonistic situation. One black, one of Algerian descent, and one of Jewish descent. And basically their various experiences. And it's all around the aftermath of a riot, which was caused by a police killing of a young Algerian boy, and the aftermath of the riot, and also the fact that one of the three friends has managed to obtain a gun, police gun. And it's all around that. Their relationships as friends, sometimes their antagonistic relationship, the experiences they go through, how they respond to their situation with a very explosive outcome.
Incredible. Yeah. Iconic movie. Very, very sad.
Very much so.
Very heartbreaking. When you prepare for something like this, do you guys rehearse it, or is it completely infused?
It's very, very tightly rehearsed. And, you know, we've actually been doing this project. I mean, we've been doing this project since 2001, you know, and we have altered it
Sure.
a fair bit actually over the years, but fundamentally it's very tightly structured and works
Amazing.
all the better. Needs to be.
Okay. So then contrast that with the show that's happening on February 22nd, Friday, 7:30 in the Black Box. What is that show going to be like?
Well, probably complete opposite of the show the night before, where we're more in the shadows and you can just hear us rather than see us, except right at the end. And this would be a classic ADF show, which is full of full of movement and energy and a very forceful sound. We hope, you know, and we encourage everyone to boogie, you know?
Yeah.
To physically engage with it. Yeah.
Can I ask you how you physically feel after a show like that?
Like I want to do it again and it stopped too early.
Really? Is it emotionally draining, or is it exhilarating, like recharging?
You see, after the show is not something like I can really talk about that much. I mean, the show itself is totally exhilarating, and really like no other, not many human experiences are like that. You know?
Yeah.
Actually played to an enthusiastic audience, you know, no matter whether it's 10 people or as we played to in the early days, or 100,000 people, which we've done quite a few gigs at that level, you know. It's pure exhilaration and it's transcendent. I actually think that coming off stage is, you know, sometimes it's a little bit, it's a little bit, it's all over. What do we do now? You know, there's even a term for it I've seen recently called post-performance depression. I wouldn't say we get that, but you know, it's like, it was so exhilarating and so transcendent. It's like afterwards, it's like, oh, how do I carry this on?
Yeah. The not that I've ever performed at that level, but the way I always think about it is as if you're wearing a sweater that's been stretched out. And then all of a sudden your inside shrinks and you're still left with this droopy sweater that's just hanging on you.
Well, that's quite, I think I'd say, Mikey, that's quite an individualistic metaphor there, you know. I've never really thought of It's a tight, sweaty sweater where my body shrinks. I'll tell you, I wish my body did shrink to that degree. It'd be a very handy way of losing weight.
That's a very individualistic metaphor.
I'll remember that one.
Yeah, let me know if that ever happens to you.
Yeah, I'll let you know straight away.
So I want to talk a little bit about how often and how you write new music as a group. I'm always curious about the songwriting process for a group with so many different voices. How does it work? Walk me through it.
Well, there's no really one method, really. It's quite a diverse methodology, and it's changed over the years. I mean, some things have come about through jams on stage. I mean, some things are, I mean, there's quite a few tracks that I've brought in which are kind of already written from start to finish, you know what I mean? Except maybe the bass line is normally written by whoever's playing the bass at the time. Yeah, I mean, basically it's a case of bringing an idea to the table, and that idea can be anything. Often in the early days, well, still today, a drum loop or a sample normally kicks it off, you know. Very occasionally, a kind of guitar chord-based song has kicked it off. I mean, the song we did with that's on my mind, obviously, we had this, you know, the tragedy of the death of Sinead O'Connor. You know, the song that we did with Sinead was very much a guitar-based song, you know, as was, you know, there's a few tracks like that started with a guitar line and chords, but not many. It's usually a sample and a drum break, you know, and then we play around with that, you know. But there's no real one method really. I mean, recently the stuff I've been writing, I've used a radically new method altogether that really wasn't available until like last year, you know. And the new stuff is sounding quite different. You know, it's definitely another step in our development.
Is it always?
So I don't think really one method. It's very after over 30 years. And if you asked me, if you picked a song, a track, and said, well, how did that come together? That would probably be more illuminating because I'll have to talk about very general terms, you know. If you picked a song, picked a track, you know.
Yeah, I mean, let's pick a song that is going to be a part of the set list in Abu Dhabi. Is there a song that comes to mind that you're like, this will definitely be a part of that, a part of the set? It's like a lock. It will always be a part of those sets. That
we could take the first two songs in the set list, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're radically different from each other. Now, some of the tunes that we play live actually came from work on the live soundtracks, right? So the opening track is an instrumental called Mind Lock, which was something Dr. Das put together, a loop. It was basically just a loop, a really weird, great industrial loop, based on an Arabic instrument, actually, the frame drum.
Yeah.
You know?
Big
so, but very industrialized and futurized, if that's a word. And he had a bass line around that. And then myself and Nathan, we improvised, we wrote a melody together, a guitar and flute in unison, right? I think I did the final arrangement, but fundamentally it was Dr. Das's loop and kick and snare arrangement that defined that. But then we built on it as a group through improvisation. Now the next track, Signal and the Noise, is basically something I got into. I wrote a couple of tracks, which were a kind of an attempt to merge Bhangra with a kind of dirty guitar sound, you know? And so, I mean, and that is very much a guitar track, a pure riff guitar track set to a Bhangra rhythm, right? And so, I mean, that would be that one, you know?
Yeah.
Then the third track, Can't Pay, Won't Pay, is basically a Chennai sample, which Dr. Das sang the bass line over to me over internet. And his voice sounded so good that became the sample, right?
You sampled the voice note?
Yeah. Instead, he was mumbling the bass line, but that was a song that me and myself and Akhtar wrote the lyrics, just about financial hardship. You know,
Yeah,
a slightly comical tone to that song.
yeah.
I mean, I could
That's
go
great.
on. You know, lots of different styles.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot to ask you for music recommendations. Okay. So if you were to put together a top 5 list or top 3 list of the best anti-racist music in terms of groups.
Number 1, Fight Den Back by Linton Kwesi Johnson. In fact, it's Sonny's Letter by Linton Kwesi Johnson, which is one of the most moving, heartbreaking records ever made. About The Equals, Police on My Back from 1967. Now, I think that is the first record ever made about police brutality in Britain. Right?
Amazing.
Now, some people might know that as covered by The Clash, right? But that's a great one.
Okay.
Gil Scott-Heron, anything by Gil Scott-Heron. Absolutely anything by Gil Scott-Heron. Winter in America, B-Movie by Gil Scott-Heron, Watergate Blues, oh my gosh. Do You Remember the Days of Slavery by Burning Spear. Young, Gifted and Black by Nina Simone. Also by Bob and Marcia Williams, which is a beautiful reggae version.
I'm going to ask you for a different list now that I have you. Who are the greatest jungle musical acts in history?
Well, you see, the thing is about jungle, it's one of these music, it's not really based around a single person. It's more about sort of record labels.
Okay.
And, you know what I mean? That's a bit tricky to say.
Let me ask it differently then.
One that springs to mind is Ronnie Size and his crew. So that takes in Ronnie Size, DJ Dye, and Crust. And they're on the Full Cycle record label from Bristol. Those are the ones that really comes to mind first, I think. Then you got the great Rob Halford, the Moving Shadow label. You know, is it Rob? Oh God, have I got his name wrong? I think I've got his name wrong. Rob Playford, sorry. And the Moving Shadow records. So yeah, Moving Shadow, and then I think Sound of the Underground records. They put out the great Apache MC, you know, the original Junglist track, you know.
Yeah.
Congo Natty, of course. Congo Natty might have released the first record which actually had the word Junglist in it, I think. You know, and my personal favorite is someone who made records under a lot of different names. The track Mash Them Down by Rude and Deadly. It's probably my favorite Junglist track. Alongside, I think, The Raven by Ed Rush.
Ideal list of collaborators.
Oh, well, I have to say we've already done most of them. And Chuck D, we collaborated with. Iggy Pop, we collaborated with. Sinead O'Connor, we collaborated with. Benjamin Zephaniah, we didn't collaborate with as such, but we used a bit of his poetry. Oh God, the list is long, man, of people we've collaborated with. So, but ideally, people who aren't, I'd love to have seen what we would have done with Sun Ra, actually, and Sun Ra's crew, a real kind of big free jazz orchestra. Yeah. I mean, Jerry Dammers, we did a remix for us, so that was one person. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, he's the ultimate, really one of the most important, powerful musics ever, and for me personally, very important, and for the rest of the group.
Yeah.
We did a track with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan as such. We were asked to remix one of his tracks. So we already did that, you know. So in a way, we've been pretty blessed when I look at it from point of view of collaborations. You know, we've been blessed. I mean, I'm a fan of Radiohead's guitar playing. We collaborate with Ed O'Brien on our 4th album from Radiohead, you know. Let me see, who else? Linton Kwesi Johnson I'd like to have collaborated with.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all would have done. Gil Scott Heron. Nina Simone, oh my gosh, you know. We collaborated with the Chittagong drummers, these incredible percussionists from Bangladesh. So we did that, you know.
Yeah.
Ali Akbar, great Bangladeshi singer. So we did that. So it's a bit of mangle here, Mikey, because a lot of the ones we dreamed, we actually did. You know, I'm just trying to find someone who, I suppose Sun Ra and Nina Simone are the two people that would have been most difficult to collaborate with.
The last question is, insofar as this started as an educational initiative, and in many ways, I would imagine that you think of yourselves as people who are trying to educate and enlighten whilst on stage. You're going to an educational institution, you're playing at NYU Abu Dhabi, you're speaking and playing to largely students. What sort of message are you trying to leave with them, not only about the issues you're talking about, but are you hoping that they then start their own versions of ADF essentially?
Oh, well, that would be amazing. But let's be honest let's be clear about what a version of ADF is to us. Okay. A version of ADF to us is not a group that sounds like Asian Dub Foundation. But it tends to be reach into yourself and the music you've grown up with and the vibes you've grown up with. Express your own experiences in relation to your background, right? And then throw a lot of stuff from outside in musically, right? Now, that's quite an interesting thing you raised there, because this was a big thing for us. Still is, I think. It's like, you know, a lot of the collaborations and projects that we did were we made links with groups who we felt were doing the similar things to us, like sometimes putting us to shame. Like, you know, our first trip to Brazil was a kind of educational exchange thing with a group in the favelas called Afro-Reggae. There's been a film about them. Now, unbelievable what they did and the circumstances they did. You know, they set up a music education project amongst kids whose parents had been killed in police raids. And I'll tell you, when they did a private performance for us, that was the best gig I'd seen up in my life up until then. They had everything. They were a rock band with samba and all kinds of Afro-Brazilian music, with jungle too, hip hop, and theater based on their experiences. They simulated the police raid with costumes and action while playing the music. Unbelievable, right? Now that was a kind of group. That was really, we were a much humbled version of them. Do you know what I mean? Without us having met before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I went to the desert Mali to see the group Tinariwen, one of the best groups ever. The Malian guitar music. I highly recommend your viewers to listen to that music. They were trying the same thing, but in the desert, where, you know, sometimes there's no water, let alone electricity. So, you know, what I'd say is be true to yourself, allow lots of influences to come in, be true to yourself. Now, sometimes we see the opposite and we don't like it. You know, we actually don't like when people dissolve their personality into somebody else's culture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
By all means, be influenced, use methods from other cultures and what have you, but put yourself at the bottom, at the base of it, you know? And don't self-censor. I think that's a big message made here, right? Now, it's very difficult for younger people getting into music now, especially in Britain, because so much is controlled by brands and corporates, you know? And people, it's strange. People feel that they have to censor what they say in order to get the brand income from sponsorship and things like that. It's really problematic, you know? Yeah. So that's probably the most difficult thing that we encourage in people is say what's real to you. You know? We never said that you have to be as political as we might sound, but you have to be honest about your world. Do you know what I mean? however that honesty manifests itself.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing.
Steve, I really tremendously appreciate your honesty and your candor and your lists. Not lest I forget your lists. Thanks so much.
Anytime you want a list, I'm your listographer.
I will send you an email and ask you for more lists. For those listening, if you don't remember, there's a show on the 22nd of September and there's a show on the 21st of September, both at NYU Abu Dhabi's Art Center. So much fun talking to you, Steve. I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy your trip.
Thank you. Yeah, enjoyed it very much.